Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stew again, and this time we're going to look at a video I did about Australian high-speed rail about a year ago. This was a fun one for me and unique among my videos. The origin of this one is I received an email from someone in Australia indicating that their boyfriend was having a birthday and that they would like me to perhaps sign a book or something for their birthday, and I said I can do you one better. So the thing I have to offer the world is YouTube videos, and I thought that would be really fun. I've been to Australia. I knew that they were planning some sort of high speed rail off and on between Melbourne and Sydney at least. And I've been to both of those cities, and I have traveled the route, the Hume Highway between Melbourne and Canberra, uh, which is roughly the route that the train would take. And so I thought it would be kind of a neat way to offer birthday wishes to Ben from Melbourne, and also to revisit my vacation there in 2016. So, it just seemed like a good fit all around. We're right around the same time of year this year. So, Ben, if you are watching this video, happy birthday again. So, the video starts out in Melbourne at the Flinders Street station. If this were to happen in reality, a high speed rail train would likely stop at the Southern Cross station, which isn't too far away. But, I'm a bit of a romantic, and the Flinders Street station is a really, really beautiful old station. So I went ahead and went with that one, even if it's not as practical. Melbourne's a beautiful city, has a lot of transit, great transit system there. Their streetcar system is phenomenal. One thing about this video is that I jumped around quite a bit because there is not, unfortunately, a ton of 3D building data in Australia on Google Maps. And so that means that it is much more difficult for me to produce renderings like this. Here we're coming into Broadmeadows, which is a suburb of Melbourne, and I picked that as a first stop because it's a fair distance out of the city center. It's a nice station. It seems like an area that has some potential for growth. Broadmeadows is also intended to be a station on the suburban rail loop. That's a metro loop that's supposed to go around about half the city and connect to a lot of the other metro lines on the city. And that would also connect Broadmeadows with the airport, which is about 6 kilometers from the Broadmeadows station. So overall, seemed like a good place to stop. And I'm a believer in suburban stations, especially when metro areas are as large as they are in the case of Melbourne and Sydney, where they're pretty big. The cities themselves are quite compact, very compact by standards of other countries, really. And then they do have some sprawl out to the suburbs, so maybe that situation could be rectified a little bit with some better transit. You're going to notice in this video there's a couple different versions. There's a right-hand version and a left-hand version. And the left-hand version was rendered as a result of being informed that, in fact, trains in Australia run on the left-hand side. Unfortunately, while I was there, I did not have an opportunity to ride on a train. I think that would have been fantastic. I think if I went back, I would take the train pretty much everywhere, even though their intercity rail isn't all that great. But otherwise, especially in Sydney and Melbourne, I know that transit's really good. Coming up next is Craigieburn, and I invited the audience of this video to have a laugh at my pronunciations of various place names in Australia. I actually didn't do half bad from what I hear. Even though my Australian accent got pretty good in the 10 days that I was there, uh, I'm never going to be a native Australian or sound like one. So I did flub a couple of place names. Craigieburn was one. I think I called it Craigaburn or something like that. So the reason that Craigieburn is, even in the video, is that is where the current electrification on that line out of Melbourne stops. And I was just illustrating that a high speed rail train would need to transition from the existing electrified line to the existing unelectrified line. Another interesting thing about Australia and this concept in particular is that they're running two different types of gauges. So they have an Australian gauge. I don't remember what the size is. I think it's slightly larger than standard gauge, but they're also trying to incorporate standard gauge when they can, because that's the worldwide standard gauge. And so another thing about that area in Craigieburn there is it switches from Australian broad gauge to unelectrified standard gauge. Okay, so now we're quite a ways away in Albury, and the reason that we've made a big jump here, and I think this is something like 100 miles away, is that there just really is not any 3D Google Maps data between the two areas. Albury is a city of about 100,000. It's really one of the only larger cities between Melbourne and Canberra. And so, of course, we're going to have a station there considering the distance and the size of the city. In this video, I opted to roughly follow M31 pretty much the whole way. And in hindsight, that probably wasn't the best choice. So there is an alternative to this option that has been looked at in various Australian high-speed rail literature that would follow the A41 road from Albury into Canberra, kind of in the back way. And the advantage of that one is you pick up another fairly large regional city along that route. I believe it's called Wagga Wagga or Wagga Wagga. If neither of those are right, you guys from Australia can all have a laugh. The advantage of A41 over M31 is that it's a fair amount easier as far as routes go. M31 is pretty challenging. It would be pretty expensive. And while A41 is longer, it's going to be cheaper to build. And like I said, you also pick up that extra city. Now, I had high speed rail fairly slow out of Melbourne. And then I just wanted to show a true high speed area. And north out of Albury, I think, would be true high speed for quite a ways. So that was the whole point of that sequence. Once again, we get into the country, the 3D data goes away, and we end up picking it back up in Canberra, which is the national capital. Beautiful city. If you get a chance to visit it, it's very cool. Reminds me a lot of Washington, D.C. in the United States, but a lot more contemporary. So it's kind of an interesting take on a national capital. If you're from a country that has one that's a little bit older. Canberra is kind of a mid-sized metro area. I think it has something like 500,000 people in it. But being the national capital and all the national capital business, you're definitely going to want to pick that up. The area that I have for the station isn't super central, but there really aren't a lot of great options in the area. I have this as a terminal station, and when they've talked about this, they have talked about through running. And if they were to do that, it would have to be a tunnel, and it would have to be a pretty long tunnel, and that means it would be really expensive. So I think there would be more likely to have a terminal station like I'm showing here. It's right off the freeway. I think it's something like 3/4 of a mile from the government buildings in the middle of the area. The whole place has kind of a cool layout. So I don't think you're really missing a whole lot if you don't have a station right in the middle of everything. Okay, and then once again, there's pretty much nothing on Google Maps, 3D Google Maps data between Canberra and pretty close into Sydney. This is kind of in the Sydney suburbs here. You can see the city skyline in the background. And so really the reason that I'm showing this area is because I can. Now, the thing about this area in Sydney was we were talking about in the video, okay, these rail lines are already there, and there's not really a good way to get from the southern part of Sydney into the core without a really long tunnel. And once again, that's very expensive. What I tend to do in these videos is pick a cheaper option because I think cheaper options are more likely to get done. Right now we're coming into central Sydney. In this video, I did opt to terminate at Sydney Central Station. This is not the only option. As plans for high-speed rail in Australia play out, we'll have to see how that goes. Speaking of that, I have been watching the situation since I made this video, hoping something would happen, but really not much has. They did a business case study at some point at the end of last year, but still haven't released it, which bodes well for the business case. I mean, if it was all that great, I would have thought that it would be out and about already. Plan for Australian high-speed rail at the moment is to start between Sydney and Newcastle, which is about 120 miles, which would be about 175 kilometers. And it's supposed to be really expensive because there's going to be a ton of tunneling. So we'll have to see what happens with Australian high-speed rail. Australia and in America in this regard are kind of similar as far as the subject goes, where there's a lot of talk about it, but not necessarily a whole lot of action. And it's, a politically contentious and hotly debated subject. But it's still a fun one. This is one of the things that I enjoyed about that video in particular, was that it seems like everyone in Australia has an opinion about high-speed rail, pro or con, and it seems like people are pretty informed about the subject over there as well, which is good to see. But that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you on that big beautiful freeway.